Penn State Nittany Lions are now projected to land the number 3rd athlete in the entire country for the class of 2024, and that is Quentin Martin. He's an in-state target. If Penn State is able to get a commitment from him, this would have the same impact when they landed Micah Parsons.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. My name is Zach Seyko, your host, and I am joined by a very special guest, and we're going to get some important information about some key recruits for Penn State, and that is Dylan Callaghan Croley, the recruiting analyst for Rivals, covering Penn State, Oregon State, Minnesota, Michigan State. So if you didn't think we'd get experts on for this, you were wrong. Dylan, I appreciate the time here as we got some very important news regarding high-end recruits for Penn State.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Zach. Glad to be on. And yeah, there's definitely quite a bit of news to talk about. And
before we move any further, where can people keep up with your work personally?
You can keep up my work for the Penn State side of things at Happy Valley Insider on Rivals. Simply just go to pennstate.rivals.com. You also can keep up with me on Twitter at Dylan_Rivals PRZ as well.
Yeah, and Locked On Nittany Lions, so privileged to do this. We have partnered with Penn State Rivals, so it's great. That is all your go-to content for Penn State athletics. It is over at Penn State Rivals. All right, Dylan, I think we've used enough time here. Let's jump into this because everyone wants to know where Quentin Martin is going.
Yeah,
he's an athlete. We'll get the answers to all these questions from your perspective because he's listed as a running back in some places. He's listed as an athlete. He's listed as a defensive back. You can literally use him anywhere. He's that talented. And honestly, I think if Penn State were to land Quentin Martin as a verbal commit and then ultimately sign him, this has the same type of magnitude as Micah Parsons when he committed back in the day. But yeah. From your perspective, you had a forecast recently that said Quentin Martin is going to commit to Penn State. How confident are you in that rating? When or could you expect an announcement from him? And when did you ultimately think that, I feel confident in myself knowing that Quentin Martin's confident in going to Penn State?
Yeah, so Quentin Martin is somebody that I've always been pretty confident that Penn State was eventually going to sign or get a commitment from, eventually going to sign. It was just going to be on how long it takes to get to that point of where he commits. Confidence level of putting in a future cast. For me to put in a future cast, I have to be pretty confident on that. That's where I think the player is going to go. Whether the player tells me straight up, like, "Hey, I'm going to probably end up committing to this place," or if just talking to sources, they feel highly confident. If multiple sources are feeling that, then I'll put in a future cast as well. Martin is mostly number 2 after talking to a few sources over the last few days. I felt pretty good about Penn State's chances going forward. I felt good about their chances even before that. Like I said, I've always felt that there's pretty high odds he would end up with the Nittany Lions, but it seems seemingly likely that that's going to happen. Timeline-wise, I'm not sure. He's been pretty strict in terms of saying that he wants to take his official visits, wants to then commit after those official visits. We'll see if that does happen. If that does happen, we're looking at maybe a summer commitment out of him. But I do know Penn State is going to be pushing very hard for a commitment out of him in the meantime, or the rest of the spring and into the summer. And we'll see if they do get that done. But whether it's in a week, 3 weeks, a month, 3 months from now, I expect when Quentin Martin does make an announcement is going to be for Penn State. I look at it, I think the main competition right now is Ohio State and Pittsburgh. Ohio State just got a running back commit from another pretty high-end prospect, James Peoples, and they're in it for a couple other running backs. So I'm very intrigued to see how that works out for the Buckeyes in terms of who is, all on their board, where they sit, who are they willing to take commitments from, because that could have an effect on Quentin Martin's chances with Ohio State for sure. And then Pittsburgh, I mean, that's the hometown team for
Yep.
Quinton Martin.
Yep.
They, as much as Penn State wants to keep him in state, Pittsburgh absolutely wants to keep him in the Pittsburgh area, in the city, and they're going to push like crazy for themselves to keep him. And I've been hearing that they're going to be throwing out, some good NIL deals his way. And I've heard Penn State is ready to, battle for Quinton Martin on the NIL side of things, since with these type of prospects, that's what it comes down to. I mean, I know they say NIL cannot be used for recruiting purposes, but we all know how it is being used in today's game. I think Penn State tries to stick to the rules in that aspect as much as they can, and as much as I've heard they have, but it's also that gray area from an outside perspective. We don't know what exactly is bending rules. We don't know exactly what is, but either way, I think Penn State is going to be aggressive on the NIL side of things with Quinton Martin when it's all said and done as well.
And just the way that you were alluding to it, okay, Ohio State has some other running back targets. They have some other players in mind. It sounds like, because I was always under the impression that Quentin Martin was going to be a defensive back wherever he went. So what ultimately do you think? Because I know Micah Parsons like, well, I can play running back, I can play defensive end, I can play linebacker. That's kind of the case here with Quentin Martin. You're getting the best of both worlds at the next level. We've seen Deion Sanders do it and very other few athletes, but that's like, those are the pros of the pros, right? So for Quentin Martin, where does he project as an athlete? Is he going to be a defensive back, or is he going to be a running back?
Penn State's recruiting him as a running back. He's their top target at the running back position.
Wow. Okay.
And that's where he's when he signs, that's where he's projected to play once he enrolls on campus. Could that change? Absolutely. I mean, in the Big Ten, I kind of think back to like Jabril Peppers, somebody who can do a little bit of everything. Would I be shocked if we saw Martin on defense at some point in his collegiate career, whether it's at Penn State or wherever he signs? Absolutely not. But for Penn State's purposes, he's been recruited as a running back, and that's where they expect him to play year one.
Yeah, they already have a couple defensive backs for the class of 2024, and we're going to talk about one in just a moment. Is Martin the most important commitment or recruit that they're targeting in this cycle? Like, is he going to be the headline prospect or one of a few others that you think Penn State is in play for?
Sure. That's a good question. I definitely think Martin is, if he's not number one, he is number two. There's a lot of good prospects out there in the running for, but I would say for what he represents, the top target in state, a borderline 5-star prospect for us, somebody who can easily become a 5-star prospect on Rivals. Obviously not a major position of need. I think Penn State can recruit pretty much any running back in the country and get production out of that position. But I would definitely say he's, for everything he represents, the number one target. But I mean, if you want to look at other names out there that are up on that board, give me 1 second here to load the offer list. It's taking a little bit of a slow journey here. But off the top of my head, quarterback Michael Van Buren, somebody who Penn State has been.
Oh, yeah. They like him a lot.
Yeah, they absolutely love and has been recruiting hard recently. They're pushing hard for him to making a commitment sooner than later. Defensive end, Jalen Harvey is another one that they really like. They've been, in our mind, the leader for Harvey for quite a long time. And I think when he does make his commitment as well, it is likely going to be for the Nittany Lions. His recruitment is going to be a little interesting. As of right now, he isn't planning on taking an official visit, it sounds like, to Penn State. I know that would be a reason for concern for a lot of people. I don't think it should be too much of a concern. Penn State's been recruiting him, forever. That he's been on campus a boatload of times. It wouldn't be the worst case scenario if he didn't make it to campus for an official visit, because there's nothing new he's going to learn in that official visit. He's already been shown a ton of love throughout his recruitment already from Penn State, so I'm not worried about that for Penn State. And another one that was really high on their list is a guy they recently picked up a commitment from as well that I know we're going to talk about here in a few minutes.
It is Locked On Nittany Lions. Jon Mitchell is that player, defensive back out of Florida that just recently committed to Penn State. But before we get to him and some other topics, let's hear from one of today's sponsor of the show, and that is FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. The NBA playoffs are almost here. And now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is right, $1,000 bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to points scored, threes drained. Pick your favorite bet, spread, money line total, player props, points, rebounds, assists, you name it, and so many more exclusive bets like the 2x3, 2 3-pointers scored in the first 3 minutes. And FanDuel even lets you combine your favorite bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. So don't miss your chance for your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets back when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And once again, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. Now partnered with Penn State Rivals. That is right. PennState.Rivals.com is your go-to source for everything Penn State athletics. Dylan contributes to Penn State Rivals and is contributing as a special guest on today's episode. So Jon Mitchell, I guess, was this surprising? Because Penn State's done so well in Florida, but just for a defensive back, he's a 4-star according to Rivals. Honestly, maybe he's in line to become a 5-star at some point. He's just somebody that they look at, or at least analysts like yourself look at, as a next Joey Porter Jr., as a next Kalen King, someone who can be put on an island and shut down a team's top wide receiver. So let's start with the commitment. What does this do for the class of 2024, getting a player like Mitchell?
Yeah, Mitchell was Penn State's top defensive back target in this entire 2024 recruiting cycle. So this was a commitment they were very excited about. In terms of expecting the commitment, I was not necessarily expecting the commitment this soon.
Okay.
I know they've been recruiting him hard for a while. This was his first visit to campus since when he committed this past week. This is his first commitment visit on campus since October. He has an official visit scheduled for June as well. I wouldn't have been surprised if he committed a couple of days or weeks after the visit, but to commit on that visit was slightly surprising, but I'm not shocked either. Like I said, they've been pushing hard for him for a long time. Terry Smith has built a great relationship with him. One of their recruiting assistants, Rashad Elby, has done the same. Those two were huge in this recruitment, but he committed as part of I think he was on campus Thursday through Sunday. So he was on campus for quite a while. He was around the program a ton during that time. We got a lot of conversations, and I understand why he would be willing to pull the trigger at that point to commit, but absolutely huge for Penn State on the recruitment side of things. Like I said, top overall DB target. And this is a program that has been, when they want a DB, they have a great chance of landing whoever it is. I mean, they landed Kenneth Wosley out of Imhotep Charter earlier this cycle, another 4-star prospect on Rivals. So they got 2 of their top DB targets already, and there's a few others out there that they're certainly targeting at both corner and safety. Vibu Torre out of New Jersey is one that comes off the top of my head, amongst others, as well as Antoine Belgrave Shorter, who is Mitchell's teammate over at Mandarin in Jacksonville, Florida. We actually put in 2 future casts for Belgrave Shorter to also land at Penn State some point in this 2024 recruiting cycle.
And what do you like about Mitchell from what you've seen, from what you've heard about him, from what you has been said, and any other research? Because Mitchell, being down in Florida, thank goodness for social media and online, you don't get to always watch these kinds of kids in person. But what does he bring to the table as just a pure defensive back?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that sticks out to me is his length, 6'1", 175 pounds, but has great length, and he has plenty of room to add more weight to that. He has great speed. He's a very good track star for Mandarin as well. Beyond that, his coverage skills are great. His footwork is great. Fluid hips. you can put him pretty much up against anybody and expect to have solid results out of him. Like you said, he has that chance to be a Joey Porter Jr. type player for Penn State here in the future. Great going downhill against the run. He can honestly do a little bit of everything. And I've heard off the field, he's a hard worker, always looking to get better, watching film all the time, stuff like that. So I very much do like what he brings to the table as Penn State, as a potential future Penn State cornerback. Somebody that Terry Smith's going to be able to mold right into the type of cornerback they want to use. And I wouldn't be shocked if he's a guy who sees playing time early in his Penn State career.
Let's move towards a final segment, and this is just kind of the overall place that Penn State is at right now. They have 6 verbal commits in the class of 2024, and I know recruiting is so fluid because so much can change, and then you almost have to have plans for each class. Like Penn State will had an identity for the class of 2022, and that was to build the ground game back up. And then the same thing, 2023 was about making sure the offensive line was as deep as possible and to land 4 offensive line commitments. So what do you believe is the identity for the class of 2024 for Penn State, Dylan? What are they trying to land? Is it to be as diverse as possible? Is their position group they're really targeting? Because for them to go get multiple linebackers and multiple defensive backs, you know that it seems like they're leaning defense, but how do you think this class can finish up with what Penn State wants?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the class projections, I think a good projection for them right now, based off what they have so far, who's out there, is I think this could be definitely a top 10 class. Now they'll have to land a couple big fish for that to happen. Michael Van Buren's one of them. Like I said earlier, they're pushing for him pretty hard and would love to get a commitment out of him as soon as possible. Quinton Martin, of course, who we talked about earlier. Ernest Willer, a defensive tackle out of IMG Academy, is somebody who I think they have a good shot of landing. His recruitment's a little bit of a quieter one, so it's really hard to get a true gauge of where he's at in his recruitment, who's the leader, other contenders. But Penn State, I do believe, is a legitimate contender for him. He's originally from Baltimore, Maryland. So not only, do they recruit Florida well, IMG Academy well historically, but with him being from Baltimore, that's very close by. Yeah. Maryland's another school to watch for him. Current Oregon wide receiver Tyzier Denmark is somebody that they're still hoping to, push for and potentially flip down the road. We'll see if that happens. That'll, of course, be a little bit of a tough flip to do, but I certainly think they have a shot. I've heard good things about Marcus Higgins so far, just as a wide receivers coach overall, about how he fits with the staff on the recruiting trail. Another wide receiver that comes to mind is Keelan Adams out of Virginia, somebody that I think they're the leader for right now as well. In terms of class identity, I think there's definitely, you look at position groups that they would like to hit home runs at. Linebacker, they'd like to hit a home run at. They're off to a great start there. Kari Jackson and Anthony Specka both are part of that class already. They're pushing for several others. Jalen Harvey, we do have it listed as a linebacker. He fits more so, I think, as a defensive end at the next level. There's also another guy who is that linebacker defensive end type hybrid guy is Jamonte Waller out of Alabama, somebody I should have mentioned in our last segment. He's a guy that Penn State would love to have in this class, somebody they're really pushing hard for. That's going to be tough, though. Alabama, Auburn, all those big SEC programs are in on him, but Penn State was in on him early on. That stuck out to him so far. He's going to make an official visit in June. I do think they have a legitimate chance. But as any athlete from the South, I like to say, getting them committed is step one, but you have to hold on to that commitment, whether it's, a few weeks, a few months, or 6 months, because if Waller makes, a decision in June, you have to hold on to him till at least December. So I definitely think linebacker, defensive end, that front seven is going to be a major goal for them this year. Finding defensive tackles is going to be important in this class. It's a spot where they've had their struggles in the past of, missing on some tough guys. That makes Ernest Willer one to watch. Jordan Thomas out of New Jersey, who's been on campus several times. They've been recruiting New Jersey fantastically over the last few months since Khalil Ahmad joined the program in January. He's been their key guy in New Jersey as part of the recruiting staff. Offensively, I think wide receiver, they know who they want at wide receiver. And I think they're doing pretty good there. Keelan Adams is one to watch, like I mentioned. There's a few others that if my list would pull up here, it'd be much easier to go off the top of my head. But offensive line is another place, of course. They're off to a great start there with Cooper Cousins, but they're also in a good spot for Kevin Haywood, William Satterwright out of Ohio, both four-star prospects. Satterwright's actually a top 100 prospect in the nation. They just had a high three-star Egan Boyer out of North Carolina on campus. They're now one of the top schools for him after that visit. So there's a lot of guys that they have high on their list right now that they're in a very good spot for. But in terms of identity, I'd definitely say you're looking defensively at the front seven, then offensively, they want to continue to build that depth at offensive line, but also at wide receiver.
Yeah, and wide receiver is just something that, at least in this just season cycle, going to the transfer portal for two guys, like that's just kind of unheard of, and they made a switch for a reason. Hopefully Marcus Haggins continues to do a really good job. Dylan, before we wrap this one up, I'm curious about your process as a recruiting analyst. Sure. What goes into your reporting, your future casts, and everything, talking to select players, just ultimately, what's kind of to get to point A to point B for these types of things for you?
Yeah, so like most professions in life, it's very much connections based, who you know. It's a challenge because some of these kids honestly are not much talkers. They don't want to talk a ton, and other kids are willing to talk a lot. One of the things you kind of notice over time is the kids who are your 3 stars, low 4 stars, tend to talk a little bit more. Your high 4 stars, 5 stars, a little bit harder to get in touch with, understandably so, since everybody's trying to get in contact with them. But for any one recruit, I think what's important in our process is you want to try to figure out who these different programs are targeting. For me, I also have Penn State, Oregon State, Minnesota, Michigan State. So I'm at any one given time talking to dozens of recruits. I have hundreds of recruits on lists trying to figure out who's a realistic target, who's not, who's actually considering these programs. But getting in with the recruits in terms of being able to contact them whenever we feel need to, and they feel comfortable giving us information is key number one. But also getting in contact with their coaches, getting in contact with handlers, as you could say, trainers, all that. It's a lot of getting to know them, getting in contact with key people in their recruitment relationships first. But after that, it's a lot of, going to our sources within these different programs, asking them various questions. They're not going to give us away all the information. But as you help develop those relationships in ways, what can you do for me if I do this for you? So there's very much sometimes, trading of information or can you get this guy in contact with us? So it's a lot of that. But then after that, it's just really staying on top of all these recruitments, talking to other analysts. A lot of these kids are visiting 10, 15 schools before they narrow down their lists, and then tracking down how they feel about each individual school. It's a long process for any one recruit. It's probably, close to, for example, if a high-profile recruit is visiting on a Saturday, we're probably talking 2 hours of running down people, talking to people about them coming into the visit, or talking to the player coming into the visit, their feelings on a certain program wherever they're visiting, and then after the visit, you're trying to track down the player again. You're talking to their coaches to see what they're saying to their coaches, but you're also tracking down your sources, seeing how they're feeling on the side things, because maybe player A feels great about wherever they've just visited. But the school feels a little differently. You got to figure out the balance of who's higher on each other, where does the school see them. So it's a balancing act, and it's a lot of, cross-checking information, seeing if how the program feels is how the recruit feels, so on and so forth. It can get confusing when you're talking about as many recruits as we talk about over the course of one recruiting cycle. I mean, especially for a program like Penn State that offers 300 kids in any given cycle. It's a lot of tracking down, and thankfully a lot of these kids are willing to talk. There are some who don't, but it is quite time consuming. I think people probably have an idea of like that our lives are kind of easy. We just talk to recruits, talk to sources, and that's our day. But it takes a lot of time to track down each individual recruit, talk to their coaches, trainers, and then talk to these sources. And especially when it comes to our sources, whether it's inside programs or perhaps other analysts or that or whoever it may be, there's a lot of schedules you have to line up, and it takes, for any major recruit, you're talking definitely over the course of a cycle, a couple of days at least of work to go from the beginning of recruitment to the end of recruitment, when you consider everything in between.
Dylan, I hope people learn to appreciate the work that you put in more each and every time here. And where can people keep up with your work? Because I certainly really do appreciate it.
Yeah, you keep up with us at pennstate.rivals.com. You keep up with me at Dylan_Rivals PRZ as well. I'm always posting information on there as well. And at Penn State Rivals, you can absolutely subscribe, but we also give away quite a bit of information on our free boards as well at times. So even if you maybe aren't sure about wanting to subscribe right away, get a account on pennstate.rivals.com at Happy Valley Insider. Sign up for a free account, get on our forums, and we host expert Q&As every now and then on there as well. You'll get plenty of good information on our free boards. But we do surely would appreciate it if you did subscribe, where you will get a ton more information. We are always dropping tidbits on recruits every day. Today has been very busy on the site. You can pretty much ask us a question whenever. We'll answer you whenever. It's a lot of fun over there, and we surely would appreciate it if everybody went over there and did subscribe. But if not, a free account does the trick as well, to get the information you are looking for.
And Locked On Nittany Lions, now part of that family, your go-to podcast for pennstate.rivals.com. Happy Valley Insider. Go to pennstate.rivals.com for everything Penn State athletics. You'll find it over there. And thanks again for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch. Make sure you check out Locked On College Basketball. I know the season's over. I know UConn was just crowned champion, but Isaac Shade and Andy Patton do such an incredible job over there with that show. Make that your second listen as they're going to wrap up this season and preview what's to come in the transfer portal and everything else. That is Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Dylan Callaghan Croley joining me here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Hopefully the first of many visits. Dylan, thanks so much for the time. I appreciate it. Can't wait for our next conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Zach. And I'll be back anytime you want me.